Welcome back to English Through Wisdom. I hope you learned something valuable from our last lesson. It is wonderful to have you here again today.
He stood in the center of the market, laughing louder than anyone else, while the men around him clapped him on the back and called him brilliant. No one noticed the old priest across the street, watching in silence. No one noticed the farmer who had just lost everything he owned, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd. Everyone believed this man had won. Years later, I finally understood the wisdom hidden behind what happened next. Welcome to English Through Wisdom. Here we learn English through powerful stories, timeless lessons, and wisdom from cultures around the world. Today, we will discover a story about pride, patience, and the quiet law that eventually finds everyone. The story. The town of Kirtipur sat between two rivers, and everyone who lived there knew the name Dinesh Verma. He owned the largest grain warehouse for 3 districts, and when his cart rolled through the market, shopkeepers stood a little straighter, hoping he would stop and greet them. That morning, Dinesh stood outside his warehouse, counting coins into a velvet pouch, while a group of merchants watched with open admiration. He had just closed a deal that would have taken any other man a year to arrange, and he had done it in a single afternoon. "Tell us your secret," one of them said, grinning. Dinesh smiled the smile of a man who enjoyed being asked that question. "There is no secret," he said, "only intelligence. The world rewards those who move faster than everyone else." Across the narrow street, an old priest named Guruji sat on the temple steps, sipping tea from a clay cup. He had watched Dinesh grow from a thin, hungry boy who once begged for leftover rice into the wealthiest man in Kirtipur. He said nothing, but his eyes stayed on Dinesh a moment longer than they needed to. What the merchants did not see, what nobody saw except the people it happened to, was the quiet cruelty behind every deal Dinesh made. That same evening, a farmer named Ram Lal walked into Dinesh's warehouse, his shoulders bent from months of drought and worry. His family had eaten almost nothing that week, and the only thing standing between them and starvation was the harvest sitting in Dinesh's storage room, harvest that belonged to Ram Lal. "I only need what is owed to me," Ram Lal said quietly. "My children are hungry." Dinesh did not look up from his ledger. "The contract says the grain belongs to me until the debt is cleared. You still owe interest from last season." "But you changed the interest twice," Ram Lal said, his voice breaking. "I never agreed to that." Dinesh finally looked at him, and there was no cruelty in his face, only the calm boredom of a man discussing weather. "Business is business, Ram Lal. If you cannot pay, I cannot give." Ram Lal stood there a long moment, fists clenched, tears he refused to let fall, burning behind his eyes. Then he turned and walked out into the darkening street, past the temple, past Guruji, who watched him go with quiet sorrow. This was not the only family Dinesh had hollowed out that year. He bribed the district officer to approve false weight measurements. He convinced 2 trusting business partners to sign contracts written in language designed to confuse them. And once a season, he donated a large sum to the temple in front of the whole town, ensuring the priest read his name aloud during the ceremony. "A generous man," the townspeople whispered. Guruji accepted the donation, as was his duty, but he said something that evening that few people understood. A tree that is watered with poison may still grow tall for a while, he told a young student. It will not stay standing forever. Years passed. Dinesh's warehouse grew larger. His name appeared on the donor plaques of 3 temples. His son, Arjun, grew from a curious boy into a sharp-eyed teenager who watched his father the way young boys often do, absorbing everything without being told. One afternoon, Arjun found his father teaching a young clerk how to alter numbers on a shipment record. "Why do we write it differently than what actually happened?" Arjun asked. Dinesh barely paused. "Because the truth does not always serve us, Beta. What matters is what people believe." Arjun said nothing, but something in his young mind quietly rearranged itself that day, and it would grow into consequences his father could not yet imagine. The years did not punish Dinesh loudly. There was no lightning, no sudden collapse. Instead, karma arrived the way water arrives in a cracked wall, slow, invisible, patient. His oldest friend, a merchant named Suresh, began declining his invitations to dinner. When Dinesh asked why, Suresh only said, "I have grown tired, old friend." Though the real reason was that Suresh had finally seen the pattern of broken promises behind Dinesh's smile. At home, Arjun began lying about small things, failing exams while claiming he had studied, taking money from his mother's purse, and calling it a gift from a friend. Dinesh scolded him harshly one night, and Arjun looked at him with an expression that made Dinesh's chest tighten. "I only did what you do," Arjun said. "You just do it with bigger numbers." Dinesh did not sleep that night, nor the next. He began waking at 3 in the morning, his heart pounding for no reason he could name, replaying old faces in his mind. Ram Lal's tears, the officer he bribed, the partners he had quietly ruined. Wealth surrounded him, yet an emptiness had begun hollowing out his evenings. He told himself it was simply stress from managing so much success. The turning point came on an ordinary Tuesday. His most trusted business partner, a man named Mahesh, who had helped him build half his fortune, walked into his office with 2 officials from the capital. "Dinesh," Mahesh said, and his voice was steady in a way that frightened Dinesh more than shouting would have. "I have given them the records, all of them, the false measurements, the altered contracts, everything you asked me to hide over the years." "Why?" Dinesh whispered. Mahesh's eyes were tired, not angry. "Because I have a family too, and I am tired of protecting a man who protected no one." Within a month, the warehouse was seized pending investigation. The donor plaques bearing his name were quietly removed from 2 temples. Suresh stopped answering his letters entirely. His wife took Arjun and moved to her sister's home, unable to bear the shouting matches that had become nightly events. The same crowd that once clapped him on the back in the market crossed the street when they saw him coming. Dinesh sat alone in his half-empty house one evening, and for the first time in 20 years, he had nothing left to distract him from his own thoughts. He walked, almost without deciding to, toward the temple. Guruji was there, as he always was, sitting on the same worn steps. He did not look surprised to see Dinesh. "The wheel was turning all along," Guruji said gently, before Dinesh could speak. "You only notices when it reached you." Dinesh sank down onto the steps beside him, his expensive clothes suddenly looking foolish in the temple's simple light. "I do not understand," he said, his voice cracking. "I worked harder than anyone. Why did it all disappear? Guruji offered him a cup of tea, the same clay cup he had always used. Karma never hated you, Dinesh. It simply returned what you repeatedly planted. You cannot bury thorns for 20 years and be surprised when you cannot walk barefoot. Is it too late? Dinesh asked. It is never too late to plant something new, Guruji said. Only late to expect yesterday's harvest today. Reveal the wisdom. The idea at the heart of this story comes from one of the oldest concepts in Indian philosophy, karma, written in Sanskrit as kurm and pronounced karma, with the emphasis on the first syllable. The word comes from the root kri, which simply means to do or to act. In its original meaning, karma has almost nothing to do with punishment or reward from an outside force. Instead, it describes a natural law of cause and effect. Similar to how gravity is not a punishment for jumping, it is simply a consequence of the jump. In Hindu and Buddhist thought, karma teaches that every action leaves an impression, first in the mind, then in the character, then eventually in the outer conditions of a person's life. A dishonest man does not usually lose everything the day he lies. He loses it slowly, thought by thought, choice by choice, until the outer world simply reflects what has already happened inside him. This is why Guruji never wished harm on Dinesh and never celebrated his downfall. In this worldview, karma is not an angry judge. It is closer to a mirror, patient, exact, and entirely impersonal. The proverb often connected to this idea, familiar in many cultures under different words, is simple. As you sow, so shall you reap. A farmer does not plant rice and harvest wheat. Whatever seed goes into the ground eventually becomes visible above it. This is why the wisdom in this story has survived for centuries across so many cultures, in temples, in family sayings, in proverbs passed from grandparents to grandchildren. It offers something rare, not a threat, but an explanation. It tells us that fairness in the world is not always immediate, but it is rarely absent. Life lesson reflection. It is easy to watch someone like Dinesh and feel a kind of quiet anger. Why does he get to enjoy success while the people he hurt struggle in silence? That frustration is honest, and it is human. But maybe the more uncomfortable question is a smaller, quieter one. Have you ever taken a shortcut that felt harmless at the time? Have you ever justified a small dishonesty because everyone around you seemed to be doing the same thing? Have you ever judged someone's success without knowing what they had done to earn it? None of us are asked to be perfect. But this story is not really about Dinesh at all. It is about the thousands of small choices that quietly shape who we become, long before the world notices. Have you ever experienced something similar in your own life, watching someone who seemed to win by cutting corners? Have you ever felt tempted to do the same, just once, just to catch up? What would you do if you were in Ram Lal's position, watching someone else's dishonesty seem to succeed while your own honesty seemed to cost you everything? Write your answer in the comments. Sometimes the most valuable part of a story is not the ending, but the honest conversation it starts afterward. English learning section. Prosper, meaning to become successful, especially financially. Example. The small business began to prosper after the new manager arrived. Admiration, meaning a feeling of respect and approval for someone. Example. She looked at her teacher with quiet admiration. Bribe, meaning to give money to someone illegally to persuade them to do something. Example: he tried to bribe the officer to avoid the fine. Betray, meaning to be disloyal to someone who trusts you. Example: his closest friend chose to betray him for money. Restless, meaning unable to relax or stay still, often due to anxiety. Example: she felt restless the night before her exam. Humility, meaning a modest view of one's own importance. Example: true humility means admitting your mistakes honestly. Collapse, meaning to suddenly fail or fall apart completely. Example: the company's finances began to collapse within a year. Consequence, meaning a result or effect of an action. Example: every choice we make has a consequence, sooner or later. Justify, meaning to explain or defend a decision as reasonable. Example: he tried to justify his lie by blaming the situation. Impersonal, meaning not influenced by personal feelings. Neutral. Example: the judge's decision felt cold and impersonal. Quietly, meaning in a calm, gentle, or unnoticed manner. Example: she quietly closed the door so no one would wake up. Reflect, meaning to think seriously about something or to show an image. Example: take a moment to reflect on what really matters to you. Repeat this paragraph aloud, slowly, then at normal speed. The wheel was turning all along. You only noticed when it reached you. Dinesh sank down onto the steps beside him, his expensive clothes suddenly looking foolish in the temple's simple light. "I do not understand," he said, his voice cracking. "I worked harder than anyone. Why did it all disappear?" Guruji poured him a cup of tea. "Karma never hated you, Dinesh. It simply returned what you repeatedly planted. It is never too late to plant something new. Only late to expect yesterday's harvest today." Final message. Dinesh never fully regained his fortune, but he found something he had not felt in 20 years, a quiet, honest peace. He began helping farmers rebuild what he once took from them, expecting nothing in return. Today's story reminded us that karma is not punishment, it is pattern. Every thought becomes a habit, every habit becomes character, and character eventually becomes destiny. If karma returned every thought you had today, what kind of tomorrow would you create? Keep learning English, keep discovering stories, and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.
If you enjoyed learning English through this ancient saying, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need this wisdom today. Until next time, keep learning English and keep collecting wisdom from around the world.